Welcome to Dice in Mind, a podcast hosted by Brad Brown and Jason Kaufman to explore the intersection of life, games, science, music, philosophy, and creativity through interviews with leading creatives. All are welcome in this space.
We have been on a very interesting kick over the last few episodes where we aren't talking about traditional sci-fi or anything like that. We aren't talking about science per se. We are going down this path of research and academia and stuff, which just absolutely, as someone who isn't in that realm, but it's this, and what I think is most fascinating to me is, and I was thinking about this today as I was doing some work, is this is a merger of academia and business, because this is academia training people to go out into the world, into the business world, where we've had folks on where we're talking about art and business and art and study and about gaming and research and such. And all of this has application in the real world. And I am just so excited for this path that we've taken and for our guest tonight. Just because this is even though when I was originally thinking of about going to college and I was on a different path. I was on like on a music path and such as that. Being a computer nerd, I mean, just in this day and age, I wonder what my path would have been if the internet had been around and gaming was like it was. I mean,
I think we just passed is it 35th, and it's just days ago. I saw this online today.
1991, the invention of the World Wide Web.
Its debut. Yep.
Tim Berners-Lee and all of that, yeah.
And Mosaic, and so I mean, it's a timely thing you're bringing up right now.
Yeah. So I was just thinking about how all these lines, it's just ironically a web of how
a web of people,
all this is crossed
and ideas and conversations. I hesitate to compliment you so publicly, but it's been 5.5 years. I'll do it once. What a beautiful introduction, Brad, because I think you encapsulated like what we're both thinking and feeling like just perfectly. Like our two, I mean, you never cross the beams, but like our two perspectives now, like our professional backgrounds, our interests, like we've always had a lot of overlap in terms of our interests, but like now it's all crossing over courtesy of Dice in Mind more than it ever has.
More than it ever has. And these latest guests and these latest discussions and episodes are just, it's just been, not that any of them, all of our guests have been fascinating to me. We always come off these episodes whenever we record. I'm always invigorated by them, but every time. I'm just even more so just by listening to just what's going on in academia and how it's filtering out into the world and how it's permeating into
and the business
application.
Element. Yeah, right. Yes. And the business, like in the 30 plus minutes we were chatting before we clicked record.
Yes.
Which is on the high end of average for us. It's within a standard deviation. It was all about the business of some things that are coming, not like out in RPG land, and us trying to figure out, well, what does that mean for these different licenses, and what does that mean for these products? And we're probably wrong about everything, but it's interesting to think about it.
And I think this is even more so, interesting is that when we're talking with our guests, like tonight's guest, Dr. José Zagal, is we're not even always talking about, I jokingly call it analog, pen and paper RPGs. We're talking about video game RPGs. We're talking about um, console RPGs. We're talking about games of all types,
That's right.
whether it's pen and paper, console, video game, handheld, whether it's on your phone, whatever it's the case, games of any and all types,
Yes.
and the research that goes into all of those.
Yeah, and that's
Um,
something that we've been touching upon on and off for quite some time on Dice and Mind, and you and I have been talking a lot offline. We've really, really wanted to talk with people who are not involved just in game creation, but in game research, etc. And so, a couple weeks ago, we spoke with John Harford and Ari Bowie about, game design and whatnot, and that was one step closer. And
yeah,
and and now we're taking even another step closer because Professor Zagal is an expert in quote games research, and you'll hear
research.
you'll hear this. He really and graciously so educated us, and
He
certainly
broke
for
it
me,
down in such a
yeah,
way, it was so eye-opening.
dispelled misconceptions I had that I didn't know I had about the field. Right, but
Yeah.
what a beautiful counterpoint to two not 2 weeks ago but 2 episodes ago of talking about okay game design and education and research from a humanities perspective, and now more from someone like with the comp sci background and who's looking at not just the story but the mechanics and the actual, like you said, real academic peer-reviewed research. It's a pretty cool conversation, and it is a very, very, very international conversation, which we did not plan nor expect, but I think you were as pleased with it as I was, as Jose walked us through what it was like with RPGs, where he's from, and we're just going to leave it at that because
Yeah.
this is another one of our major goals. We know through our analytics for the podcast that we have listeners well beyond North America, right? Specifically, UK, we see you. Japan, we see you. Singapore, we see you. And
Yeah.
the literally scores of other countries where we have listeners. We are grateful for all of you, and we want to bring you and us more insight into what RPGs, gaming, all of this stuff for real life looks like, especially lit RPG around the planet. And so step by step, you guys listening, you're helping us get there. Before we transition, Brad, you have and I haven't talked about this, but this has been on my mind for days. Uh, I say this every year, but as the cosmic koala is my witness, I am going to make it a point before we transition to our interviews every time moving forward, and you're going to hold me accountable, to please remind our lovely audience if you like Dice and Mind, even if you don't like this podcast, but you happen to be listening by mistake, please give us a 5-star rating. Even consider dropping a 1 or 2 word comment. Nothing will help us to get the word out about Dice and Mind more than you just right now picking up your device and clicking on those stars. It's literally the way the algorithms work. So whether you're listening on any platform, just take a moment, please give us a like, move on. But that is the number one way to help us reach out to more people, hopefully more people around the world. I don't know. With
Yes.
that, shall
Yeah.
we transition?
Let's transition over and let's listen to and let's talk with Dr. Segal.
Dr. José P. Zagal is a game scholar and director of the School of Interactive Games and Media at the Rochester Institute of Technology and an avid game player as well. He teaches courses on game design, ethics in video games, and experimental games. Professor Zagal taught his first university level class in 2000, has since supervised multiple award winning student projects, and many of his former students work at leading game studios worldwide. Dr. Zagal has edited and authored numerous books and articles on game ethics, games education, game design, role playing games, and more. He most recently co-authored Seeing Red, Nintendo's Virtual Boy, and co-edited 50 Years of Dungeons and Dragons, and the Routledge Handbook of Role-Playing Game Studies. He was honored as a distinguished scholar by the Digital Games Research Association and named a fellow of the Higher-Education Videogame Alliance for his contributions to games research. He also serves as the editor-in-chief of DiGRA's flagship journal, Transactions of the Digital Games Research Association.
Dr. Jose Zagal, thank you for joining us tonight. This is actually one that I've been looking forward to for a while as we kind of started talking right before we hit record. Um, the idea of this merger of academics and gaming,
Yeah.
and as we were talking, there's kind of different aspects of this, different, shall we say, like schools, whether we want to call it schools of thought or whatever. There's different components to this, and we just have started kind of touching this within the podcast,
Yeah.
and really have looked forward to talking with you about this. And we're hitting you at a very interesting time as we kind of hit it, because
Yeah.
you are, as you said, kind of in a bit of a transition right now. So we really appreciate you taking a couple moments and chatting with us as you are, excuse me, literally traversing the country
I mean,
um,
yeah.
in this mode as you are taking on a new role at the Rochester Institute of Technology.
Yeah. So thank you so much. I mean, really,
Yeah,
really, really appreciate your time. We know it's busy.
yeah.
Um,
Hey, my pleasure. I'm excited to chat with you guys and kind of talk about some of the things that I know maybe a little bit about. And yeah, feel free to ask me any and all kinds of questions. This should be fun. I'm
oh,
looking forward to it too.
we will be asking you questions. So many questions, Jose. Um, well, I think Brad, let's just start kind of how we typically do. So you are you are directing essentially, as I'm going to simplify it here, you are directing a school that oversees your game research programs at the university. Is that approximately correct?
Sort of. Okay, so I'm at
Yeah, correct
Rochester
me.
Institute of Technology, which is RIT. Universities that have lots of different colleges that are
Hmm.
divided by a general subject area. So I'm in the Golisano College of Computing, and oh, it's got a longer name, which I'm always blanking on. It's Computing and Information Sciences.
There we go.
And within the College of Computing, there's a bunch of different units and schools. So there's a School of Computer Science, there's a cybersecurity, and I'm heading up what is known here as IGM, which is
Hmm.
Interactive Games and Media.
Excellent.
Um, we have there's an undergrad degree, there's a master's degree. Um, some of our faculty have PhD students in a sort of a college-wide PhD program.
Mhm.
And so I'm going to generalize here that pretty much, but well, we also have a new media degree as well. Most of the students have an interest in making games and working
Yeah.
in the traditional video game industry,
Okay.
and they're sort of picking up skills and learning about what that means and what it entails. And I would say RIT's flavor is primarily a technically minded one, technically
Mhm.
focused one. So the students will work and make complete games and ship them and make them available on Steam or other digital
Wow.
distribution platforms. But every student has a sort of baseline of, I can code, I can write, I can program, as well as all these additional skills you need to have on top of that.
Excellent. Okay, so something to address for our listeners as much as anything. So the three of us were chatting just to kind of get to know each other for about 10 minutes before we hit record, and you corrected me that this concept, this field of games research is
Yeah.
is more on point for you and what the school does than what I was saying is just game studies. Could you, for all of us, could you just give us an outline or define what game research might look like? Whether it's what's going in or what's coming out.
Yeah, so I like to think of games research as a sort of big, broad sort of umbrella.
Hmm.
And within that umbrella, there might be people who aren't necessarily reading each other's work, right?
Hmm.
So some people might be and this is in the scholarly academic context, right? So you might have someone in an English department who is writing about, the narrative and interpreting, doing sort of a close reading of, let's say, Dark Souls 3, for example. And they're interested in how it, deals with certain topics or issues and how these are sort of represented in the game and so on. So that would be one, that's definitely games research. That might be in sort of the game studies. But on the other hand, you might be, let's say you might be a psychologist in a psych department, and you're interested in understanding what is motivating about certain games
Oh,
for
that's
kids, for
interesting.
example.
Yeah.
And so you might be trying to understand what are the fundamental elements or qualities of specific games and how are they connected to, let's say, what we know about cognition and how people engage with and what motivates players, for example. So they're very different. Here, you're both caring about games. The
Hmm.
psychologist cares about, well, how does this interface between players and why are we motivated to play this game and all this other one? Are there general motivations that maybe apply across the board, but that all games hit, that some games hit, and so on and so forth? Um, on the other hand, you might have someone in a computer science department who is interested in some of the technical aspects of game development, um, and how this interfaces with a lot of ideas that sort of in computer science, right? So it might be, well, how do we implement better solutions to, I don't know, render real-time graphics for games, for example, where there's important constraints in terms of this thing needs to, generate graphics and display them on screen at a certain speed, which is the opposite of what you might have if you're doing graphics for, let's say, movies, right? Where
Yeah.
you can have all the time in the world to generate just one frame and can have all this detail, but when it's
Right.
real time, it might be different, right? You might be looking at AI agents and how to program better agents, enemies in the game so that they have behaviors that are both fun, interesting, but also kind of more sophisticated, right?
Mhm.
People talk about how playing against bots isn't as fun as playing against humans. So sort of there's a rich area of trying to understand, well, how do we, make bots that are actually more interesting to play against? Um, Even in the context of sort of generative AIs, there's a lot of people working on, well, how do we generate new games? Can we generate games whole cloth that are actually fun, interesting? What information, what kind of knowledge is, or what kind of the game design knowledge is there embedded in, or do professionals have that we can somehow leverage or come up with systems to support, let's say, a game developer making games faster, I'm using better in air quotes, right? Because you have to define, well, what does that mean, and so on.
Sure.
So these are all sort of very different ways of thinking about games, and for me, they're all under the umbrella of games research. Personally, I tend to have an interest in kind of all of them in weird ways. Um, and I just picked three, right? So I could come
Yeah.
up with, 20 different ones. And each of these might have different communities. Some might be disciplinary, some people might go to a AI conference for computer scientists and they're presenting their work on games. But
Yeah.
there are also just games conferences that are sort of really broad where all kinds of people will meet.
Uh, humanities and sciences?
Sometimes, yeah. I haven't been in a couple of years. One of my favorite conferences is the Foundations of Digital Games Conference, FDG, which has submissions coming from technical games, but also, and I haven't been in a couple of years, so maybe this has changed, would also have sort of more humanities style work
Neat.
as well.
Wow.
And it's an opportunity for like scholars to they're either scholars that like kind of bridging the gap, like
Hmm.
doing work in
Hmm.
both areas. Also,
So I have a loaded question, and this is probably an extremely broad one, Jose. This is such a cool field. Now I don't work in academia, and I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night, so I'm not going to even attempt to try to pretend to be one. But how did you end up in kind of in this realm? You now are the director of the school. You are a published author, um, and have written about like, you know, about video games like the Virtual Boy. You've written about D&D. You've written about other things. How did how, if you don't mind, and again, very, very, very
Yeah. How did
broad,
you
and I
get
know
into
I'm,
this?
yeah, how did you end up here?
I guess it's a combination of serendipity, uh, sprinkle some luck on top of that, uh, naivete, and that sort of youthful arrogance that helped me just do the things that I thought you could just do. So I had to take you all the way back to the 1990s. So I'm in university. I'm in Chile, which is where I got my undergrad and my master's degree.
Mhm.
My undergrad was in engineering, civil civil industrial with a mention in computer science.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Neat.
It's a 6-year undergrad, so
Oh.
there's plenty of time to do a lot of coursework, and it was a lot of coursework.
Yeah.
And so in this context, there was a professor who was teaching, um, a class on sort of computer architecture. And in the context of this class, he had us as an assignment. So computer architecture is sort of low-level programming, basically, is one of the key things. So we were writing in assembly, and so he had us sort of write some video games for a Game Boy emulator using sort of the Game Boy assembly
I'm
language.
sorry, I just want to interrupt for everyone for just a sec. Just if you didn't catch that, everybody. We were writing in assembly, he says nonchalantly. Okay, keep going.
I love the
Oh
fact that
my
we're
God.
talking. I love the fact that we're talking assembly because
Oh my God.
I remember doing a
Sorry.
little bit
Uh,
of that and going cross-eyed as I
Oh
was
my God.
doing it.
Okay, so
So
you're writing in assembly and he gives you an assignment.
Yeah,
yeah,
but writing games, which is kind of cool and exciting. Um, and we're writing them for the Game Boy to
Yeah,
run in an emulator. So I
I
think
have
that
mine in
was,
the closet. Mhm.
and the context that I didn't know at the time was that this professor had a research grant where he had this idea of using sort of a cheap handheld computing device to deploy them in a school, like first grade and second graders, and the kids would play these games and they would learn stuff. Right? I'm
Yeah,
super generalizing here.
yeah.
As a stand-in, because he didn't have the computer device, he thought, well, let's use Game Boys because they're kind of the right size and
Mhm.
look sort of cheap enough, or hopefully we'll be able to do something that will end up being cheap enough. And so he was sort of like recruiting us engineers to work with him on this project to do that. And so that's how I got into sort of doing research. And it wasn't about games primarily, like the main thing. It was about like education and supporting children and so on,
Hmm.
but using games to do that.
Yeah.
And I worked on that with this professor for a couple of years, ended up like doing my master's. And then when it came to doing my master's thesis, I basically I decided, and this is the naivete plus,
Yeah.
a bit of arrogance. It's like, well, I've been kind of looking online. This was mid to late 90s now, so
Right, right.
going online is just starting to become a thing. And I'm like, kind of learning that there are people who've written about like games and game design. And so I thought, well, I'm going to write my master's thesis about the design of multiplayer games with
Oh,
with
yeah.
no real like background in multiplayer game design. And realistically, my game design credits in air quotes would be, well, I've been doing some game design in the course of this project, but was mostly programming. And sure, I'll run D&D games for my friends, and I'm a DM for multiple different types of games, where you sort of write your own adventures and that sort of thing. But I wasn't even thinking in terms of like, am I qualified to this? I just thought, I can't. I think this is an interesting problem, and
Yeah.
at that moment in time, I had the epiphany, which is no longer true, that in the world of video games, most video games were like single player.
Hmm.
But if you look in the world of non-video games, like solitaire games are like the exception. Like they're rarity. They're called like, oh, this is a solitaire game,
Right.
right? Everything else is like by assumption like multiplayer. And so I started thinking, well, most video games are like single player. So what would it mean to like, how do you design a good multiplayer game? That's kind of where
Yeah.
I started thinking. I did some literature review and some background research, and I basically wrote this master's thesis. That turned into, because my professor was really interested, like, hey, to do well, you actually have to get a paper. So, and it wasn't any kind of paper. It was like a journal article. And so, like, I wrote that up as a journal article. We submitted that, and it took a while, and eventually got published. And that was
Yeah.
my first publication, which came
wow.
out year 2000.
Neat.
So I was very sort of lucky to have been in this context where there's this professor who was doing this project, and and me being recruited into it, and so on and so forth. But it was also like, well, I think I had this interesting idea, and I'm just going to run with it. I did. Um, I'm going to skip what happened a couple years later in between. I worked at, in industry for a couple years, and then decided, you know what, I should just go get a PhD. Um, there's a bit more to it than just that. And so when deciding what to get my PhD in or where I wanted to go, I went back to my master's thesis and I looked at all the authors that I had cited that I thought like their stuff was kind of cool and that I would be kind of interested in. And I kind of looked them up, like
Nice.
where is this person working and so on. And I kind of narrowed down a list of places that I ended up applying to. Ended up going to Georgia Tech, where I did my PhD under Amy
Nice.
Brookman. In my mind, I was interested in doing stuff with kind of games. My internship job was basically the .com company, and it was like an online community, social media,
Yeah.
before social media, which were kind of aligned with Amy's interests. And Amy had an interest in education, which, if I'm like 100% honest right now, that was less of a passion, more of a,
Mhm.
sure, I could do that if that's what you need to do to like get this
Yeah.
thing done.
Yeah.
Um, and I happened to be at Georgia Tech, and so I'm working with Amy, and she's teaching a class for which I'm the TA. And it was a class on like online communities, which was super fun and interesting. I learned a ton as the TA for that class. He said, okay, before semester starts, here's all the books you need to read so you're kind of up to speed with what we're covering.
Yeah.
So I did all that, and then I was in the room for all the classes. And there was a bunch of students in that class who were from a different program, not in computing. They were from it was sort of a design and technology program out of a different college.
Mhm.
And I don't remember exactly how this was, but I either got to talking with one of the students or it's sort of it became clear that like I was interested in games and I knew something about games in terms of just like player experience.
Yeah.
And so the student, Chaim Gingold, I think it was, he basically said, hey, um, and Chaim Gingold wrote a book on SimCity recently, but he also worked on at Maxis on
Oh,
SimCity.
yeah. Yeah.
Now, at that point, he was just a master's student in this program. He said, yeah, we're working with this professor called Janet Murray, who written this book on Hamlet called Hamlet on the Holodeck, kind of about narratives in virtual spaces and in games.
Yeah.
And you should just come and join. And so I did, and that turned into my starting to do games research like
Interesting.
more directly. Now Janet
Whoa.
didn't stick around. She basically realized that the direction this thing was going was I'm going to get something she was not interested in. And so she basically said, "Hey, we just hired this new guy called Michael Mateus." Now, Michael Mateus did a game called Facade, which is he's like an AI kind of CS guy, but also
Hmm.
interested in games. And so we started this project. Well, I'm gonna say we at this time. Like I have no credit. Like I claim no credit other than like I was the person who stuck around the longest.
Yeah.
Called the Game Ontology Project, which is kind
Oh,
of
interesting.
trying to come up with a sense of how do you break down games into some sort of hierarchy of concepts and knowledge that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, And that became my first, I guess maybe that was my second. Oh, I'll take that back. Like my third publication, but like a new project that was just starting up. Chaim
Yeah.
was with that project for a while. Other master students came through. I was kind of the one that kind of stuck with it longest. That's where I met Clara Fernandez Vara, who is now at NYU. So I was kind of really lucky to be in a place where the idea of doing games research just for the sake of games was just starting to take off kind of
Yeah.
globally. Um, and Like there's a conference called the DiGRA conference, which is DiGRA stands for the Digital Games Research Association, which had been like founded maybe just as I was starting my PhD.
Hmm.
They had like a pre-conference and they had a conference. By the time the second conference hit, um, Michael and I and a bunch of other people were like submitted this paper. That's when I said like that became my third paper. It was to this conference, right? And so going to this conference was for me like it was like a seminal experience. It's like, oh my God, here's my people that also
Yeah.
care about games, and I've been a member of that community ever since, and I go to
Yeah.
the DiGRA conference every year, and I've had a role in that as a scholar as well as like through like service and so on. But that's how I kind of landed in that. So. Like if I go back in time, like, oh, if Chaim hadn't said, hey, you should come join us, like maybe that wouldn't have happened. Maybe I'd have heard about it separately. Um, Janet kind of stepping back and inviting Michael, and then Michael and I did wrote a bunch of papers and so on. Amy, I was able to turn a lot of my games research stuff into the work. I was able to roll it into my dissertation with Amy. That became my first book.
Neat.
Um, so it was kind of a lot of
Wow.
little things that kind of like, I think it's serendipity, luck, and a bit of like, sure, I'll write a paper on this because I'm curious about that, and
Yeah.
then being lucky in the sense of it getting accepted
Yeah.
and other people then reading it and going like, oh, that was kind of cool and citing it and so on. So there's kind of like a bit of a academia. A lot of it can be kind of a bit of a snowball where you
Yeah.
start doing stuff and then
Absolutely.
if you're lucky and it resonates or becomes important, then that helps like you pursue that further, right? You're like, oh,
Yeah.
people really resonate with this idea. So like what else is interesting? And I tend to be I kind of very much follow what I'm interested in and what I'm curious about.
Mhm.
Some of my papers just like no one reads them, but I'm cool. Like I had fun researching them and writing them. Um, but that's me.
I think that's all wonderful. I mean, yeah, I think that's just wonderful. And that's just like the best of academia. And especially that you get to play in the spaces that interest you.
Yeah.
Nothing better. Okay, so speaking of playing in spaces that interest you, kind of an adjacent thing to this, kind of a question, but of the many things you have done, scholarly and otherwise, one of them is like writing a book about D&D for MIT Press, which is just like the coolest thing. So,
Yeah.
and I will say, like, I mean, I like MIT Press does have a wonderfully diverse range of topics that they publish. Like even though I don't like their new bookstore, their original bookstore was like Holy Land. New one looks like it's not the same. But the press is, I mean, the range of what they do scholarly wise and beautifully, it's unlike any other academic press I've seen. But still, how does one go about pitching to an academic press a book on something like that? I know that MIT Press already had a bit of a history with it, but
Yeah.
that's still niche.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the book pitching process, I can speak to that more broadly and then
Yeah, please.
kind of give you some of the particulars of my experience with MIT Press. But so in the world of, I guess, popular press, um, you might be submitting a manuscript to a publisher and you're kind of hoping for the best.
Hmm.
Academic publishing is slightly different because by and large, the professors don't make any money,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And it's not that like MIT Press is hoarding all the gold, like smog on its treasure pile. It's just that the academic books don't sell in these sort of
No,
massive quantities where you
that's
can
right.
just make a living from that.
Right.
Now, there's some exceptions. Textbooks, if they're actually widely adopted, can be,
Yeah.
a good source of income for an author there.
Hmm.
Um, and so a lot of times it's about finding. So you often start with the case of the 50 Years of Dungeons and Dragons book. That was Marcus Carter and Pramit Sidhu, who at the time was Marcus Carter's PhD student. Marcus Carter is a faculty member. He's in Australia. He's in Sydney, does game stuff. He'd written books with MIT Press before. They approached me and said, "Hey, we were thinking of doing this thing for like about D&D." And they approached me because I had done this other book on role-playing game studies.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so we started talking about what the book could be about and so on. And wouldn't it be cool if it kind of came out the year that D&D turns 50,
Hmm.
and so on. And so we make a list of which publishers might be good to work with and um, would be good for, in this case, we were thinking of Pre's kind of career, like as a junior
Yeah,
scholar,
absolutely.
what looks good on for her on her
That's
CV, what
great.
she's interested in, and so on. Marcus and I were like, yeah, sure, like a better, air quotes, better regarded publisher is always good. So we made this list. And I thought that MIT Press is probably going to be a long shot, but sure, let's start there and we'll see how it goes. And I'm going to confess a little bit to my surprise. They're like, yeah, this sounds super cool. Let's roll with it. Obviously, there's like, changes and revisions and so on.
Yeah,
And so basically that gets the ball rolling is, in this case, the editor at MIT Press being willing to take a chance on this and kind
yeah,
of saw what we were trying to do, which was let's put out a book that is, yes, it is kind of academic, but also kind of
right,
hopefully accessible
right,
and to a layperson, hopefully accessible to a fan of
right.
let's say D&D who wants to sort of go a little bit deeper. Let's try to have a diversity of kind of topics that will hopefully, I guess in my mind, if a random person picks up the book and they're really into D&D, hopefully they'll find like two or three chapters. So like, yeah, that was so cool, so interesting.
Hmm.
Some of the others were like, yeah, not my stuff, and that's okay because we were trying to kind of hit that
Yeah,
diversity. You'd have to ask the readers if we worked, but that was at least our aim and our goal.
that's all that.
Um, and then you go through the process. So unlike typical popular press books, um, there'll be an editor, and the editor, there might be some approvals, but once the book is kind of you're writing it, like you might be a back and forth with the editor about like cutting stuff or editing stuff. MIT Press doesn't work. Academic publishers typically don't work
Yeah,
like that.
right.
You're not getting line edit. Well, there's copy editing which happens afterwards, but that's
Yep.
about like
And
typos
it's a
and stuff like
huge
that.
pain in the you know where, but yes. Yeah.
What is different though is that there's typically sort of an academic review. So
Hmm.
here's a manuscript. The publisher goes, okay, cool. They send it off to sort of anonymous academic
Hmm.
reviewers who
Hmm.
then read it and go like, yeah, here's what needs to change before like I think it would be worth publishing. So there's sort of this
Hmm.
external vetting process, which is academic in nature, that
Yeah.
you don't see in a sort of
Right.
regular sort of popular book. Um,
Nice.
yeah, so I guess that's like I guess I would probably say this is more to MIT Press credit that they were like, yeah, let's publish this. Then
Yeah.
I think the amazingness of our pitch, because we would probably send the same pitch. If they had said no, we were going, okay, let's go
Right.
down, let's
Right.
go to the next one, and we
Yep.
wouldn't have necessarily changed it. And I think actually MIT, one of the interesting things about MIT Press is that they do have a bunch of books which are very role-playing game friendly that aren't
Yeah.
coming from like an academic source necessarily.
Hmm.
Um,
It's true.
and I think that's so. I think they saw this book as fitting in that and not having to fit in their other series and so on.
Right. Neat. That all makes sense. That's very cool.
I have to, you mentioned this just talking about D&D and everything like that. Now, um, it's something that's interesting because you had mentioned that you got your undergrad, your undergrad and your 6-year program down in Chile. Um, Playing down in Chile, and maybe too broad of a question. Um, you know, we've talked with people who have, gaming in Europe and things like that. Um,
Yeah, good.
I'm fascinated by now. My brother actually is,
Mhm.
even though he's from this area where I am at here in the Milwaukee area. He's spent the last 26 years living in Uruguay.
Okay.
Um, and we haven't really talked about this, ironically, even though we've been doing this podcast for 6 years. What was the gaming like? What was gaming like in for like D&D and all that
Yeah, what's the
in
landscape like down there?
yeah,
So I can't really speak too much to the current landscape.
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, and this is going to sound like you set me up with this question.
We
Oh,
we,
I
we did
hopefully I did.
not.
Yeah.
No,
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 it
no, no,
didn't.
no.
No.
Let me continue because I set me up in a good way, kind of like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm gonna here's the ball, and I'm gonna look like I'm like just clinging and kicking it into the goal. So for the
Yeah.
last couple of years, I've been working with some scholars in Chile
Oh, cool.
who have an interest in like the history of like how did role playing arrive to Chile and how was it back in the day. So
Oh,
it's like historical.
yeah.
And I was interested in sort of getting to document some of the stuff because I was also involved in organizing Concilio de Dragones, which was at the time Chile's largest like role-playing convention.
Yeah.
And this was sort of the late 90s.
Mhm.
And we've actually published a couple of papers on like this research, going
Oh,
exactly into the question like, okay, well, how did role-playing arrive in Chile and how did it spread and kind of what were the factors? So I can go into that if you want in
Yeah,
a bit
please.
more
please.
detail than
Yeah.
you perhaps were expecting, which is why I said
Yeah.
you
No.
sent me, I was like, oh, yeah,
I we
I've
haven't
talked.
talked about gaming in
Jose
South
turns
America in
around and
general.
comes
Yeah.
back with a stack of papers.
Yeah, so there,
I'm fascinated by this. This is
Yeah.
because we haven't talked about how it kind of like permeated South like this. So
yeah,
Hmm.
so there is a paper which I don't know if you guys do show notes, but I'm happy to send you a link
Yeah,
afterwards so you
please
can
please,
see a
do.
bit
yes.
there.
Yeah.
So basically, so Chile was under a military dictatorship from 73 and
Pinochet.
with Pinochet, right?
Mm.
And during the dictatorship, or the dictatorship imposed like really tight controls on like culture and media and so on. A lot of people that were, let's say, in the cultural industry, so poets and artists and
Yeah.
filmmakers and writers and songwriters, all the rest. There's a lot of sort of persecution of these people. A lot of them were exiled, some were
Yeah.
disappeared and murdered and so on. And so other scholars have described like this period of like the 70s and the 80s in Chile as sort of the cultural blackout,
Okay.
which meant I'm not saying like people didn't read books or anything, but it was hard to there wasn't sort of the steady stream or large local industry or anything like that. And what this means is that, yes, there were people playing D&D and other role-playing games in Chile prior to the end of the dictatorship. But they were kind of like small, isolated groups that weren't necessarily talking to each other. It was often a sort of thing like, oh yeah, there's this gringo who, you know, works at the embassy and he just happens to make some friends, or, there's this kid who's, from the US, and he would like bring this game, and then a bunch of other kids would like get around and you play. So they had this kind of isolated group. Or, oh yeah, my dad went to like New York for a job thing and then bought this thing back and I don't know what the hell it is, and so on. So all the materials, everything in English. So you had to know English to access anything. Um, I'm not saying everybody was playing in English, but it basically means like, oh, if you were like the DM, then you had the books, you had to read English and understand what's going on. You might be playing in Spanish, and your friends might learn how to play in Spanish,
Mm.
but they wouldn't have any like, oh, I'm just going to go and buy this new source book that came out. Like there was no local market in that
Right.
sense.
Right.
Now, the latter half of the 80s, actually sort of mid to later 80s, the Pinochet government basically they start adopting new sort of economic policies and kind of try to open Chile to sort of global markets and so on. And you start to see um, sort of increased access to other things from other countries, but still super tight on the cultural artifacts. Like if you, I don't know, I ordered some VHS movies from so like they would get caught in customs, and then they would go
Right.
to like a special government body that would watch them, and they might say, "Sorry, these are censored," and like you just lost your
That's it.
VHS movies, right?
Right.
Or they might say, "Okay, this is fine," and you could take it, and then you know pay the fees or whatever and take it home. Um, so the Pinochet government ends, and what follows afterwards is a sort of big opening up now of the cultural markets. Now, this coincides with in Spain. So Spain also went through a dictatorship that ended
Yeah.
like, let's say, I don't know, let's say 10 years earlier.
Hmm.
And so Spain had a whole cultural awakening after that. And as part of that cultural awakening, there was also an interest in role-playing games in Spain. So in Spain, you start to see these companies that are popping up and they're publishing their own games, so they're also translating um, games. This is, I guess, 89, 90. So the
Hmm.
big D&D translation in Spanish was actually second edition D&D, not first edition,
Interesting.
and not D&D basic
Oh,
set.
Yeah.
There was a Spanish translation in the very early 80s that could just like flopped and disappeared from the market. So it isn't even well known in Spain as much.
Okay.
And so as Chile is like the economic markets are opening and there's like an increased attention in bringing stuff in, the economy starts to do well and booming, exports are booming, and now all these cultural controls are gone. It just everything coincides. Oh, the internet is starting to arrive and then take off. It sort of
Yeah.
coincides with like Chilean companies saying, "Hey, let's start importing books from Spain and from other places."
Sure.
And so you start to get this trickle of role-playing things that kind of show up kind of randomly.
Hmm.
Like I have friends who are like walking down the street, and there's a kiosk which sells like newspapers and magazines. And it's like there's this magazine like Guide to Role-Playing, and you're like, "What the hell is this?" Um, and so these products start to appear. The people selling them don't really know what they're about, what's
Yeah.
going on, but slowly they're starting to like realize that, oh, this is a thing. Um, Now, this is around the same time that if you were born during the dictatorship, you're now college age,
Right.
which is basically that's like my generation, right? I was
Mhm.
born 75, which is 2 years after.
You're right there with us.
And
Hmm.
so we're all kind of in university, meeting new people. There's this thing called the internet. And this is pre-web, right?
Hmm.
So we're on
Hmm.
Usenet,
Yep.
and we're also in a context where these like the people that already play D&D can now meet other people like outside of
Right.
like your school or your local
Right.
friends. And maybe you're learning about like role playing because you're on this like rec.usenet, usenet.role playing and people chatting in English. And then randomly, sometimes these products will show up in stores. And we're also in a new government that is really interested in kind of supporting like local community organization and groups, right?
Yeah.
So the support for people forming groups and doing things, doing activities, and so on. To put this in context, which maybe is going to sound like bizarre in the US context, right? So the freedom to associate was something that sort of came back with the ending of the
Right.
dictatorship, right? So this idea like, oh, we can gather in large groups and kind of do our nonsense and not worry about like a curfew or anything that kind of stuff is like, yeah, you
Yeah.
can do that now. And as young, teens, like early 20s at the latest, this is all like new and exciting for us. There's this Chilean scholar that wrote a book called like the era of enthusiasm. Basically, like that's what the vibe was, right, in these decades. right? Like the
Okay.
late 80s into the 90s was like everyone was just like super excited, enthusiastic about doing stuff. Um, for some people, it's like, oh my God, electronic music is a thing, and they're inviting DJs to come and do shows. They're throwing parties. Other people's like, yeah, we're doing theater. For me, it was like, hey, this is role playing, like me and a bunch of friends that I made at this time. And so this idea, like, yeah, we should just do like a con. And like, okay. And so basically, that became Concilio de Dragones, which then grew to like attendance at its peak was like in the high hundreds every day. So it was like a 3 day event
Yeah.
Wow.
with
Yeah.
big cultural shows. Like there'd be like musicians, and it was all part of this effort. Like, okay, how do we like legit? How do we get money to support what we want to do? But also, how do we legitimize it? And so, if we're going
Yeah.
to the local city government and saying, "Hey, we want, let's say, $2,000 um, to do this thing," they're going to go, "Well, like, sure, we have these programs, these community programs you can apply to." It's like, oh, we're a cultural thing. This is role-playing games, and they're about culture and
Yeah.
storytelling and narrative. But also, we're going to have like this medieval group this group that does like medieval music, and they're going to put on a show and a concert,
Yeah.
and then, and so it becomes like, how do we bring? And I think we like all of us, the organizer, like writ large,
Yeah.
not like me, like specifically. Like, how do we do a thing that will be big and successful, but also get the word out? Like, how do we promote role playing as like a fun thing to do that's also healthy? So there's also this effort, like families to show up with their kids and like what's this about? Like, oh, just come on in, and you'll see. Like, it's like, you know, it's good for reading skills. It's also there's math and creativity and problem solving and
Yeah.
collaboration and the parents are like, what? This isn't like this weird thing that I was hearing about. Like, no, no, it's super like healthy and fun. Like,
Well,
watch your child play right now. The Chilean media was also, I'm not going to say super supportive, but was also not like moral panicky.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
they would do a lot of stories like, there's this new thing that's catching on amongst the youth. The kids these days are playing these things called role-playing games. What are those? And what they would typically do something like, well, maybe you've heard of role-playing games. Here's what it's about. We'll talk to someone who plays games like, oh yeah, it's about storytelling and collaboration. Okay, cool. And then maybe you've heard about this thing that happened in Spain. In Spain, there was like a murder that was kind of associated to role-playing game. The same way that in the US, there was
Yeah.
um, I
the
guess the budget
satanic panic in the
Yeah.
80s,
part
and
of that.
yeah.
And so they
Yeah.
sort of mentioned like, oh, this thing happened in the US and so on, but this hasn't happened here yet, but oh, let's talk to an expert. An expert would be like a psychologist. We're like, what's this
Right.
role-playing thing? What do you think? And then next time I say like, oh yeah, there's no real risk of people losing their minds about what's real, what's not real. Like we know that. This seems like a healthy thing and so on. And
Interesting.
like these reports would be kind of like explaining what it is to people who don't know anything about them, rather than reporting on like potential salacious like things. Like at least in those very early years.
Yeah.
So they're doing like TV specials. The Concilio that once has an event, like it would get covered in like newspapers, television shows, radio shows. So we got like a lot of
Wow.
media attention. I'm saying a lot for a thing that was run by basically a bunch of college kids who didn't know what they were doing.
That's so cool.
Um, so yeah, that's how like D&D and role-playing writ large kind of arrived in Chile and how it spread. This event like drew a lot of people from all the place, but then also influenced people go like, yeah, I'm from a different like we people would come from all over Chile and then they go back to like their home cities and like, yeah, we should organize a thing. And they would. And like a lot of it was modeled on how Concilio worked and so on.
Yeah. That's
So
so
sorry guys, you
interesting.
got a way longer
No,
answer
that
than
that's
maybe you're
what that's
expecting.
This
really
is
no, thank you. That's really interesting. We've really been trying to get a better sense of what the landscape is like globally, and it's very difficult to do so. So I'm
Yeah.
curious, or to pivot for a little bit, for a little, Brad, I'm taking one of your questions. Do you still play, be it digital and or tabletop? And if so, when you have the time, what do you play or what do you like to play?
So I don't currently have a regular group or regular play session. I haven't had one for a couple of years. Um, I think the last thing I ran that was sort of regular. So I was running a Cyberpunk 2020 campaign
Oh yeah.
that ended in like when we hit 2020, it was like, okay, guys, like we need to finish it in 2020. That'd be kind of cool. So we did. Um, and we were playing like in face to face, but y'all remember what happened in 2020. So we did, I think
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
it ended, like the campaign ended, maybe it was like December 2020. At that point, we were playing over Zoom.
yeah.
Actually, no, I think we were playing over Discord.
Oh, sure.
Um, And right after that, I ran a Ghostbusters adventure, which is fun. Same players as we've been playing Cyberpunk,
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
and this was the West End games,
Yeah,
Ghostbusters.
yeah,
Um, so since then, I haven't had any regular playing, though I have played like kind of one-offs and kind of one-shots and that sort of thing, and
yeah,
in different contexts. So
sure.
at cons and that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, like anything, it's a question of time.
Yeah,
In the past, I've always been in the position of like, well, I'm the dungeon master, and so like that's extra effort.
yeah,
I mean, not a lot of extra effort, but I'm sort of the one who's running the game. But the
yeah,
challenge is, okay, how do you bring together enough people to kind of make it work? And I'm also kind of, I feel kind of old school in the sense that for me, like a good session is like it's like 5 hours, and we're all face to face,
Oh,
right? And I know
yes.
that now that paints are like, oh, that's because that's how it was back in the day, right? And I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
so I need to. I guess what I should really try to do is just try to find a group to join,
yeah,
and then to help me wrap my head around the what I'm going to assume is going to be like shorter sessions and how people are playing these days. Because I mean, I ran this Cyberpunk campaign.
interesting.
I didn't run it any differently than I would have run it uh, back in the day. Except for I tried to do a couple of things that I thought were kind of fun, where I went to like experiment. But
Yeah.
all the players, like none of the players were like super into like none of them had a ton of experience, and so for them it was like all new. So I think they were super. Oh, this is super cool. That they weren't necessarily going like, oh, this is okay, but that's not how we play nowadays. Like we moved on. I didn't get any of that.
Mhm.
Are there any recognizing, time is a factor, right, for all of us. But I'm curious, are there any games that are on your radar or just pique your curiosity that you haven't had a chance to do anything with?
Yes, I played. I'd love to play a good. So I've read the books and I have a sense of the system, but like, how does it actually operate in practice? Anything powered by the apocalypse, I'd like
Oh,
to try.
interesting. Okay.
Um,
Okay.
because it feels like a very different style of game. But I'm just from reading the books, I'm like, okay, this seems like kind of straightforward.
Okay.
So, so I'm not sure about like what's going on there.
Hmm.
I've I'd love to play the Lord of the Rings game. I'm guessing this is a common issue. Like, I'm not the only person who does this. Like I still buy books and I'll read them occasionally, and they kind of sit there, right? And I'm like, yeah, sometime we'll get to play this one.
Hmm.
So I forget if it's called the One Ring or the Lord of the Rings game.
Yeah, the One
The
Ring.
one, the Lord of the
That
Rings
does
is the
look
5e
good.
system, and the One
Right.
Ring
Yeah.
has its
Okay.
own mechanic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been buying the One Ring books, and this
That
is like
does
this.
look good.
The Alien game looks really good. I'd love to run that game too.
Oh, interesting.
Um, let's see what else. I'm blanking on the name. I think it was Phoenix Rising, Phoenix Command.
I don't know
All
that
I know
one.
is the premise of the game,
Yeah.
which is, and I'm probably going to get this wrong, so apologies. So it's a game where you basically you have X amount of characters, and when your character dies, you get to play the next one. The next one's more powerful. And it's kind of like the idea that
Oh,
rather than your
yeah.
characters just die, you can kind of choose to like,
Interesting.
you know what, I'm going to have a heroic death right now, and then you do
Yeah.
your heroic thing, but then you die, and then you kind of play the next character along the path. Um, so its system seemed kind of interesting. Just this notion that it's okay to die and you make it epic,
Yeah.
such that like it matters, and the kind of the game kind of
Intriguing.
recognizing it. So I think it was. I don't know if I'm allowed to like look stuff up on Google or not right now, but
You could do whatever you want, of course.
um, I think it was. So I bought the game and I have it sitting there, but I haven't read it. Right.
Brad can say that about a great deal of games.
Yeah, that's I have
My
bookshelves
name's
where
Brad, and I have a problem.
yeah.
Welcome, Brad. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, it's not Phoenix Commands because I also have that one, but that one I'm not particularly interested in playing. Um, Dawn Command.
I'm very curious about this die well so that you can advance. Uh,
Okay, I found it. It's Phoenix
okay.
colon Dawn Command.
Interesting. Okay. Okay.
I'm going to assume the information I'm seeing is correct. So, same designer as Eberron, which okay, cool. Um,
Interesting.
Yeah, there's like I couldn't tell you anything other than what I just said.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
even maybe that is wrong. It's one of those things where like, oh, I heard about it. Oh, that sounds cool. So I'll just buy a copy because I happen to have the money like I'm sitting around at that time.
yeah.
So that was on my radar. I made I'm going to call it investment. So I bought the Murder on the Orient Express, Call of Cthulhu mega campaign,
Oh, wow.
which is like a giant. The box is giant and it's
Really?
solid. It's solid paper, so it might as well like.
Oh, wow.
And I was threatening to like, hey, we should play this with the group I did the Cyberpunk, and they were like, okay, sure, but I never kind of focused on like,
Yeah.
hey, let's actually do this
Yeah,
now.
yeah. Ooh,
Um, and that seemed like, oh, this will be like a couple years worth of like playing. And so
sounds like it.
I'm excited to play that at some point. I guess those
Hmm.
would be the top ones that come to mind.
That's a diverse, like that's a thematically and mechanically diverse range of goals. That is pretty cool. Yeah.
If you and obviously with you being out in Rochester and all
Well,
that,
and
there is
unsupervised,
yeah, if
Yes,
right?
there is a
unsupervised.
Yeah.
there is a one ring it's called the Strider Companion, which is a
Right.
might not be your thing, but it's a solo piece where you can go out and actually do some soloing with the one ring just to get a feel for the mechanic and all that if you get interested
Yeah.
in it.
Well, essentially,
So
they bring that up because that's one of the things that I've looked at with I don't really get this, but sure, is like solo role playing.
Yeah.
yeah,
Now, to be
Yeah.
fair, I am very familiar with the sort of fighting fantasy, the game book, choose your own adventure,
Yeah.
make a choice to move along. But I've been really fascinated, but mostly because I don't understand it, right? So
Hmm.
this is not I'm not, what's the phrase you use? I'm like, if that's your jam, you should go and do that. Like,
Absolutely.
I'm
Yep.
not like,
No judgment.
I'm not judging in any
Hmm.
negative way something else, but I've been fascinated by this. I'm gonna call it like a rise of this style of game. Not just
Yes.
the journaling ones. I guess I'm seeing two flavors, which is kind of interesting. I think I'm calling one the journaling, which is like here's some prompts, and you're imagining. I'm in my mind, I think you're imagining yourself as a character, kind of
Yeah.
keeping a journal or answering these prompts. And the other flavor is the here's a bunch of random tables, and you're kind of rolling on them, and stuff is happening.
yeah.
And it's
Hmm.
funny because for me, the random table is like, well, that was like my playing first edition D&D and being a young dungeon master. A lot of that was like
Yeah.
going to the dungeon masters. Was it Dungeon Master guy that had these at the end? Like a bunch of tables at the end, and you could kind of map out a dungeon by like, rolling, and then like
Right.
that was your
Yeah.
map, your dungeon, and I'd
Mhm.
show up to play. And I mean, they were terrible, right? That's not like, but for that age, and at this point in my case,
Yeah.
like I've been 13, and my
Yeah.
friends were like that age. It was like,
Yep.
this is wild. Like, oh my
Yep.
God, what's in the next room? Roll, roll, roll. Oh my God, there's a
Absolutely.
dragon. Oh no, and then roll, roll, roll. It's got
Yeah.
50,000 gold pieces. Like, it's all like we were
Mm.
definitely in the sort of hack and slash Monty
Yeah.
Halling sense.
Yeah.
But the rolling on tables was fun. Like I remember
Yeah.
that being a fun part of the experience because I would either roll beforehand and have a map, or like I would roll the map like behind the screen, like a roll, and then do the map behind the screen, and then tell them like the players what they were seeing. And they kind of enjoyed that because they realized that like I wasn't trying to screw them over essentially
Yeah.
something bad
Right.
happened. It was just like
Right.
it's just bad luck, this is the table. Um,
Right.
Similarly, like, oh, you open the chest, there's a potion. Okay, let's roll on the
Hmm.
potions table,
Hmm.
see what kind of potion it is. Like that
That's
was
right.
kind of fun.
Kind of
So I
the
think it's
fog of war, kind
yeah.
Yeah.
of. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it seems kind of interesting. There's this, and maybe I'm misunderstanding kind of the space. Yeah, there's like this genre of solo role playing, which is
Yeah.
basically random tables, and you
Yeah.
buy I bought a couple of these, and I flipped with them, and I bought this cool game, and it's a
Yeah.
booklet, and then it's basically like a bunch of tables that you're rolling on. I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool.
Yeah, Brad and I have talked, you and I, Brad, we've talked a lot about this phenomenon, more offline than online for the past, I don't know, couple of years now. I think, Jose, you're absolutely right. It's really interesting. And like psychologically and sociologically, one might question why now, maybe post-pandemic, are these solo games becoming, well, who knows whether people are just reading them or playing them, but why now are they becoming so popular? But like we've talked with creators who have designed very random table heavy solo RPGs. We've talked to creators who have designed entirely narrative
Yeah,
solo RPGs, and like you said, they all work. But just the phenomenon of being able to play by yourself or just read and imagine that without anyone else. It is very interesting and it's very provocative to me.
There's this, and Jason and I have really latched on to this intersection of RPGs and literature.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And um,
Yeah.
we've been fascinated by these solo RPGs, kind of like what you were just mentioning, Jose, journaling, where using RPGs to almost generate lit,
I mean, you and I tried
you know.
that poorly, but
Mm,
we used Michael Dismuke's Star Trek Adventures Captain's Log to use
mm,
the tables to help us together generate really short stories for sessions. And I mean,
yeah,
it died on the vine, but it was a really intriguing experiment. And
yes,
it
Yeah.
worked, which was the kicker.
Yeah. And
yes,
I mean, the RPG space is sure.
Wonderful.
D&D is the elephant or the gorilla, or
Hmm.
and there's a couple other games that would be like small. But for me, like the edges, where all I call it, I think of it like the froth. It's
Nice.
super interesting and super excited, especially. I guess what it is, right? I think we're like in the golden age of game design, and maybe there will be
Yes.
like a better golden age. I don't know, right? Where people are playing like tabletop, like board games have also shot off in terms of like interesting design innovations, and then those work their way into role playing, and then role playing is working its way into LARP, and the people doing LARP are also
Yeah.
innovating, and everything is kind of cross-pollinating, cross-feeding. Where some people's like, "What kind of a game is this?" Right? And if
Yeah.
you guys familiar with the game The Quiet Year?
No, say that one more time.
Are you familiar with The Quiet Year?
I've heard of it.
I
I've
don't know
heard of it.
anything about
Yes.
it.
Yeah, so Quiet Year is a it's an amazing game, right? And I use it in a class, or used to use it because it was a class I used to teach back at Utah, which I co-teach. I co-taught this class with the philosopher C.T. Nguyen. Um, and basically, it's a sort of collaborative storytelling map making game
Okay.
where there's basically I'm going to describe it like the worst way possible, so it sounds like least appealing, and then when you play it, you're like, oh my God, it's so much better than what Jose was saying. You basically have a deck of cards, and you're sort of going through this deck of cards, and the cards have prompts, and the prompts are sort of guiding kind of the
Okay.
things that might happen. But it really is very much like together we're creating like a world, and then we play this once, and that
Interesting.
was the world that we created, and there's a story there, and then end it essentially, right?
Yeah.
Which, if you think about it, it's like for some people, like, oh yeah, we play the Quiet Year, and then we take what we built there, and then that becomes the source for our D&D campaign, right?
Right.
Or some people's like, yeah, we played Microscope. I don't know if you played Microscope.
Yeah, we just had him
We
back
just
on.
we just had the author on. Yeah,
Yeah,
we've interviewed him
Ben
twice
is
now.
coming
He's
on
been
after your episode.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so I think that game is fascinating because it
Yes.
works not just as a game,
Yeah.
but also works as a game that complements other games, right? And so
Yes, right.
that's why we're this really cool space where, sure, maybe it's for me, it's like it's innovation all the way down, and there's so
That's
much
cool.
exciting stuff that you don't
Yeah.
have time to play it all.
No.
Um, but just even this idea that, we'll play this game Microscope, we'll do this thing for a couple hours, and that
Right.
will become the basis for a campaign. And then there's someone else who did a separate game that we could do for like our character generation or not character generation, or,
Right.
all these different ways of running games and playing
So
games and so
cool.
on, right? And that space, I think people are feeling much more free. I guess I'm seeing it as a positive, not as solo games
Yes.
like, oh my God, that's so sad. People don't want to play with each other.
Hmm.
I'm just seeing
Hmm.
it as, oh my God, no, we're just really kicking the tires on this medium and like really pushing it out and seeing how far it can go and what
Yes.
kinds of new things you can
Hmm.
do. Right.
Yes.
Like when I ran this Cyberpunk game that I was telling you guys about, um, just just I did a thing which is completely like not allowed in the like if you're traditionally playing the game, right? Um, but in the context of other games, like other role-playing games, like, oh yeah, that's the thing we do all the time. But it feels like I could bring in sort of some of these innovations or just experiment and do wild things. So, okay, it's a cyberpunk game. There's a team, and they're like the undertrodden, and they're like a team for hire, like your typical kind of setup, and they're working for who knows who's paying the bills, is the corporation or not. And I said, okay, it'd be fun. Um, because my players weren't really all that familiar with like cyberpunk as a genre or the game itself or the lore behind like the game, I thought, you know what? Let's do something different, and we'll have a scene, and this is maybe a couple of hours where they will play the board of the corporation that is trying to screw them over, right?
Interesting.
And so I
Oh,
basically, and it was like very little prep on my end.
Yeah.
I basically gave every player said, okay, we're going to do a thing that's a little bit different, and it's like slightly different. And each of you is going to be a different board member. And it's kind of like you're so and so, your role is so and so. Like, oh, I'm in charge of security, or I'm like the operations, or I'm finance, or whatever it was. And I gave them a couple prompts about who the other characters were. So like, you don't like this other person because they're always kind of trying to screw you over or knife you in the back, or you think so and so's like been a reliable ally, and so it's like so kind of. And this was literally like maybe 4 or 5 lines of
Yeah, yeah.
printed text that they could read.
Okay.
And then I, as a dungeon master, I was like the chairman, essentially, of the corporation. So I was the chair of the
Okay.
board. And so I basically said, okay, this is an extraordinary board meeting. We need to discuss, this, that, and the other. And and I give them enough information in my like intro that they realize, oh my God, he's talking about the stuff that we were doing as players, like as our like regular PCs,
That is
right?
cool.
Um, And now, and I know I ask like direct questions to different board members, like, okay, well, what do you think of that? Should we implement like Plan X? And kind of let me just like riff, like I don't like they don't know what Plan X is. I just made it up, right? But they have a bit of like there could be a little bit of tension between them, where someone else could say like, I think Plan X is a terrible idea, but they don't do that because their character said like you will probably be against whatever someone says because they're
Yeah,
always there
yeah.
for themselves, right? Um, and so in my case, I was acting instead of be as a DM, like reading a bunch of stuff, I could act as the chairman of this board, um, get the board to make a decision that then would impact the players later on. And they know this as players, right?
oh,
Um, and it's kind of setting up like, oh, this will be exciting. Now they know that there's like, I don't remember exactly what the setup was, but it's kind of like saying, okay, so we're going to hire a special hit team to go after them. Yes, okay. And they're going to drop in from orbit or whatever. And like, yeah, okay, cool, approved. And that's close scene. Okay, now let's get back to your characters. You're
Oh,
hanging
that's
out in the
so
apartment. Like,
interesting.
what are you guys going to do, right? Um, and I could see in their heads as players because they're sort of new to role playing. They were like, uh, okay, now I have a whole bunch of more like interesting backstory that really upped the drama and the stakes because they know like, oh shit, like things are. Sorry, I cursed.
You're good to go.
you're
Yeah.
Right.
good.
Um, but they're also kind of wrestling with the okay, we're not like how do we use this information in a way that makes
Yeah.
sense for the game, right? Like the character knowledge versus player knowledge. And I didn't tell them like don't use this like it's just like we're role playing here. Let's just go roll with it.
Yeah.
Let's have fun. Um, Now now you're going to play a new character and here's some relationships between them. Like I'd seen that idea in some like uh, micro LARPs or experimental LARPs,
Yeah.
right? Where that's kind of the setup, right? Like your character is like your name, you decide what else, and then you're given relationships, right? And in some games you might determine those relationships as part of this LARP, for example, like who's your greatest enemy? And then like so and so has a grudge against you or knows something secret that you don't want them to know. Like they'll give you these kind of prompts to help you kind of set up the web of characters so that when you play the game, there's stuff to go off of. And I thought,
Yeah.
well, let's just like bring that into this one game for a short thing that doesn't need to go anywhere, right? It wasn't like I don't need to develop the background of who these board members are. Like that
Right,
was
right.
not relevant to the adventure. But I was using it as a tool to like build up drama and to basically say, like, if this is a movie, it's like, oh, now cut to the boardroom scene, right? Or
Yeah.
cut to the assassins who are like outside the apartment where all the characters are hanging out, right? Um, so I thought it was like an interesting way to sort of mess around with the game, and it would not have occurred to me to do anything, in my view, kind of wild like that. I'm using air quotes because for some people, like, "Pfft, that's like so basic. Like, I can't believe you thought that was wild. But coming from where I was coming from, I was like, oh, this is
Yeah.
kind of wild. And I'm only doing that because I'm inspired by all these other people putting out these really cool, crazy games that are
Yeah.
basically messing with what does it mean to be a character, to play a character, to run a game, to like, do we need to have a plot, and so on. And like this is part of continuum, right?
Yeah.
It's more now than ever before, but it was obviously like it goes back, 20, 30 years and so on.
I think that sounds like that just sounds like so much fun and so creative and gives me so many ideas. I love that. Just think that back and forth in the boardroom. I never would have thought of that, but that actually kind of oddly fits well. Uh, just kind of a series of sandbox D&D games. I'm GMing for Brad and a couple of other good friends. I definitely have ideas now. Mwahaha. Jose, we want to be mindful of your time because you're busy, you're in transition, you're an hour later than we are. Thank you so much for chatting with this. This has just been a joy. Delightful to meet you. So interesting to learn from a scholar of games research what that is about and like truly what that landscape can look like. Um, it's absolutely fascinating stuff.
Yeah. Oh, I guess for listeners who are like curious, like, oh, is this a real thing? And depending on your age, like there's plenty of places you could get PhDs in games.
Yeah,
There's
amazing.
undergrad degrees. A lot of them focus on production, on making games, and a lot
Yeah.
of it is video games.
Yep.
But there's plenty of people studying games like all over the place. So
Yeah.
if you're like if you're in high school and like, oh, I'm going to go to college, like you should be asking those questions, like, hey, I'm interested in this. Who do I talk to? Where do I go? If you think of going back to school, there's master's degrees and
Mhm.
also, like I said, like PhDs,
Yep.
places all over the world. Like it takes kind of knowing where they are to like
Yeah.
look into them, but those communities are
Yeah.
definitely there.
Well, it
So
sounds like RIT is a great place to start that investigation. We will be sure to put some of those links in the show notes because I mean, like, we've gone and man, does I mean, my next degree is not going to be in games research. I know that for sure, but I was scrolling through and it's like, oh, I wonder, right? Like, just for that moment, like, oh my God, does that look interesting? Yeah, and especially because it's not just in the humanities.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and
thanks.
if you just want humanities, go for it. If you just want
Yep,
philosophy, go for it. If you just want computer science, there's also like there's all kinds of places and people, and a lot of them kind of with hands and feet and
yeah,
collaborating across these different like academic divides. I mean, academia, a lot of it is actual silos, not
yeah,
literal
yeah,
silos, but these
yeah.
metaphorical ones are pretty tall and pretty
Mhm.
strong. And so there are people who are like bridging those gaps. And and I guess that's the last thing I want to say.
Yeah,
So a lot of people are like, oh, I'm not a scholar, but like how do I do this? I think one of the things where games research has really benefited a lot is in the work that fans and players do as well. In role-playing games, like a lot of the most important like concepts were first put forth by, designers, by fans, by players, and so on. Um, like John Peterson, who's written what I would call like
yeah,
all the fundamental books on the history of D&D.
right.
Uh, he might be okay with people calling him a scholar now, but way back when I first talked to him, he's like, no, I'm just like he had this passion to do this thing, right? Um, and so even if you're in air quotes like a layperson, no, everybody out there's like played a lot. And if you care, like this, it's intellectual work does not belong to like academics alone.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It
good
also
Well,
great
belongs
point.
excellent
to
point.
anybody who wants to do it. So game history, my God, like 90% of the best work is from
Oh,
non-academics,
oh yeah. I
right?
think of I just saw something on I think it was on Facebook, um, about the what Evil Hat is re-releasing and differently releasing Apple Klein's like
Yeah.
tomes, right?
Yep.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's like, well, this is just Apple Klein is like, I mean, he's been around forever.
right. But still,
So it's like the perfect person to write the books that he's been writing, right?
yeah, yeah,
And now they're not academic, but they are rigorous in the ways that
yes,
like doing good work means being
yes,
rigorous, right? It's
yes.
not about like the style or the formatting of academic
That's right.
work.
That's right. Thank you so much for spending time and opening our eyes.
Well, my pleasure. I've really enjoyed this. It's super fun to meet you guys, and yeah, happy to stay in touch. Just let me know.
Please do. Well, thanks again to Jose for joining us, and
So
just
much.
best wishes out there um,
And you made the
in
mistake
Rochester.
of
And
asking if you could come back someday. So, haha, you will be coming back to Dyson Mind.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah. You made the mistake, so you're now one of us. One of us.
No need to insult
Um,
him, Brad. Yeah.
yeah, I know, but just fascinating and really really cool to. I just getting into the whole South American
Oh,
gaming,
thank you for that.
in
Yeah.
Chile and everything like that. I'm just so interested in that kind of thing and the nexus of gaming down there and how that just in how it plays out in different countries.
Yeah.
And so getting that information out, we'll have that in the show notes and everything like that. That's just really, really cool stuff.
Very cool.
So
Mhm.
let's head over to Loon Cafe.
We should.
What's been on your table lately?
Well, I will keep mine brief, and it's a little self-aggrandizing, but it's just because there's so much joy I'm experiencing about it. As we record yesterday, Modifius announced the upcoming 24th century source book for Star Trek Adventures second edition, which I mean, obviously, I absolutely love. And of course, we know a bunch of their people really well. A bunch of them are friends of the podcast. We're grateful for all of that. But I mention this because this will be the second source book to which I have written to contributed something. Very,
Yes.
very small piece. I want to be really clear about that. But something that is near and dear to me. And I continue to be honored truly that I've had two, and I hope I get another chance to contribute to some of these books because they are just amazing. And again, I have a little bit of insight, but really very little more than everyone else right now. And just knowing a number of the other authors who wrote all the big pieces, and then knowing the rest by reputation, just like the 23rd Century source book, I am convinced this is going to be a serious, significant product in terms of what you and I would consider like soft canon or gray canon. Like you were saying before we recorded,
And
and
lit
lit.
in yeah.
Yes, like you and I will both read this.
Oh,
Right.
absolutely.
I just have a handful of sidebars, but the stuff that's going into these eras across the book, oh man. So that's not on my desk yet. I'm looking forward to receiving the PDF in maybe a couple weeks, around the time it becomes available to those who had pre-ordered. Um, and when November rolls around, I will be very, very pleased to hold that in my hands. And yeah, like you said, read it as lit. How about you? What's on your desk? What's on your
Yeah,
mind?
I haven't had a lot of time these days
Hmm.
from a, a, a reading perspective.
Yeah.
There's just a whole heck of a lot been going on with me.
Yeah, you got a ton
Um,
going on.
but I did get recently, and this is way outside our normal, shall we say, bailiwick.
I like your
Sitting
grandpa
up,
words. Never mind. Sorry.
yeah,
You go ahead.
I figured.
Sorry.
I'm sitting, in my family room. So, like I said, I'm in the family homestead.
Yeah.
Up above the fireplace in my family room is the
Wah, wah,
television.
wah.
I don't know if I would normally have mounted a television above the fireplace.
Oh, you're
Um,
becoming one of those.
well, it's the way I inherited, obviously.
I know.
Um, but um, I felt like um, I've limited a lot of my streaming content just because I'm not here and I
Yeah.
don't have time to do a lot of television watching,
And it's a waste of money if you're not using it.
and I'm not using it. Um, but um, I have acquired something, and we haven't talked about this, and we'll have to talk
Yeah,
about this more
I
later.
am curious.
Um, I have acquired from Valve. Valve makes,
Hmm.
Valve is the company that makes Steam, the gaming platform.
Right?
What's called a Steam machine,
Yep.
which is their mobile, or not mobile, but it's their literal, actually game. It's not really a console because it's literally it runs Steam OS, which is literally like a full
Really?
Linux operating system. It's a
Oh,
it's a cube that's a little bit
interesting.
smaller than the old Apple. Remember the old Mac Cube? Remember the OS?
Oh, not the Mac Mini, the old Cube.
Remember the old cube that
Yeah.
was stood up and everything?
Yeah.
This one's a little smaller, but it's a cube. It's like it black like the Next Cube. It has a very Next Cube-ish type of
Okay,
vibe to it.
cool.
Um, so I have that sitting up next to the TV, but I have it running full Linux OS on it.
That is cool.
So people won't be able to see it on the TV, or on the, oh, you know what? I'm going to have to, but ultimately, um,
Yeah, you'll
you
send me a
know,
picture.
I'll send you a picture.
So this
But
is this is just to stream games.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
just to stream games.
Oh.
And
Oh, okay. So
um,
it has a little bit of a uh Agimus vibe from Lower Decks. Um,
yeah, it's
that's
it's
interesting.
so it runs Steam on it, so I can run Steam games. It runs Steam OS, so it runs a full Linux distro based off of, I want to say, Fedora. Um,
Wow. Jeez.
and so I can run a full browser. I can run anything off of that
Right.
I want. Um, and so I have that here in the family room, um, and have been working on it. I have a keyboard and mouse, a wireless keyboard and mouse connected to it, so
Nice.
I can sit in my recliner from 10 feet away and run a full Linux distro. Um,
So funny.
and I do, from a gaming perspective, we don't talk about this much. I don't play first person shooters.
Mhm.
I do very little, I have very little time, no time for game. If I do anything, I do sports strategy games. I have talked about that a
Yeah,
little bit.
yeah.
So the little time that I do have for gaming, I do sports strategy games. But I use I'm doing it mostly now for um like like business and my other stuff. So if I need a break
Interesting.
from sitting close on a
Yeah,
laptop like I'm doing now,
yeah.
I have been doing my other professional endeavors on this device.
Oh, if your 25-year-old self could see your 52-year-old self
Yeah,
and uh, streaming games with the browser and all this other stuff on a
on a 55
Linux,
inch
on a
on a
55-inch
55 inch
TV,
TV
huge, on a
in the
Linux
family room.
machine,
Yeah.
right? Cordless, right? Wireless from your chair. Um,
Yeah.
it wouldn't even know
Just
what to
running
make of
just
that.
running with just a little keyboard right
Yep.
here.
Wow.
So just a
That's
little
very cool.
$25. Yeah.
Yeah.
So ultimately I have actually a wireless camera. So ultimately, I wouldn't do this for our Dyson Mine recording or anything like that. But if I
Right.
wanted to do like video calls and things, I was going to set up the webcam up there and
Yeah.
be able to do webcam.
So I'm just going to
Um,
wrap us up by asking a rhetorical question for those who will get it. What's your boggle, citizen?
you know what it does remind it. Oh, God,
You know
well played,
exactly what I'm thinking.
well played.
Thank you,
Yes,
sir. There's a
well
specific
played.
scene. Well done. Yeah.
Yep, yep. So yeah, that's what little time that I have when I'm around and I'm not on the
Hmm.
move with other things going on. Um, I've been using this and not even an intended. It's actually a the difference between it's been marketed as a game console, in effect
Yeah,
to
right.
compete in effect kind of with
Well, it makes sense. I mean,
PlayStation and
you're not
Switch
going
and
to
things.
market it successfully as a Linux box.
No,
No.
no, but it functions as a full Linux distro, and it actually came out with drivers where you can install Windows on it and it can run full Windows.
I it just that's like that's seriously geeky. That's really
That's
cool.
geek. It's
That's
geeky. I
really
mean,
cool.
in theory, I could have taken my Mac, I could have put my Mac up there, plugged it into an HDMI, and run it the same way. But
Well, right, but
um,
this is interesting. This is unique. This is
but
pretty
it's
cool.
unique and it's interesting and it's Steam. And I've been a Steam fan of Valve and Steam going back to the original Half-Life in 1998. So, um, you
That
know,
brings back memories.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So that's been my, so a little bit off kilter from the days. But one more quick call out before I pass it back to you to wrap up.
please do.
Um, we've had a lot of really unique and cool guests, and I just have to call out our friend Al Spader for
Yeah,
introducing us to a number of these guests that we've had on, and a number that are
and
going to
a
be coming on.
bunch upcoming.
Al's Al has been and continues to be a real friend of us and of the podcast. And Al, thank you again
Yeah,
for even tonight as we've
yeah,
recorded has been doing it, and thank you again for the introductions and just being a real friend to us.
yeah.
And
Although we
just
are proof that you need better friends.
that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a good point.
Yeah.
But don't stop. Don't
No, no, don't
stop.
say we no
Yeah.
we appreciate it and are humbled by it. Yeah, we are thanks to people like Al and quite a few others. We are meeting people we never thought we'd meet, which is pretty cool. And the best part is we get to bring these discussions to all of you out there in podcast land. So, as Brad intimated, um, we have quite the lineup. We are scheduled for we are scheduled for episodes right now into November. which is not a bad problem to have. And we can't wait to bring you all of these conversations. So you know the deal, everyone. Be well, stay well. We will see you in a couple weeks.